Well, good Friday morning, and welcome back to the Real Estate Heavyweights podcast. I am Ashton Hines, and I'm here with my co-host and good friend, Tavis Westbrook. What's going on, Tavis?
Good morning, man. I'm good.
Well, good deal.
It's a wonderful day today.
Yes. It's raining a ton outside, and evidently that has had an impact on my computer system, and so I'm running an Audible today, so I don't have all my fancy camera to make me look 10 years younger and way less tired. So,
and it's brought out all the mosquitoes. I got a text first thing this morning from one of my tenants over in Richardson that she might have to write a negative comment that the mosquitoes have been vicious.
What are you doing? You got to figure out mosquitoes. She can't be dealing with mosquitoes. What kind of slumlord are you?
It's like they've been in hibernation all summer long with it being as hot as it is, with no rain. And then all of a sudden now it's like cooler temperatures. We're here at the, middle of October with cooler weather and rain coming, and now all the mosquitoes have decided to come out. So
Yeah, we've had some pretty
stuff.
good luck with Amazon has these tubes that you can hang around your property, and I think they're supposed to be good for a quarter acre. I hang them on a couple different posts. They seem to do a pretty good job for us. I don't do the fog thing. I know some people will do that, but yeah, I mean, it's just been damp now for a little while. The temperature's probably just warm enough to where they're coming out. So, hopefully she holds off on the negative comment. That's at some point we'll have to talk about reputation management, because there's actually software. I don't know if you know this, but there's software out there that will filter out some of those negative comments. They basically come through you first, and they can still post one, but it's a little bit more difficult.
She had great things to say last night. It just all of a sudden, this morning I get this information, but last night it was, all of this, feeding my ego, positive feedback. So I don't know. I think she got bit too many times this morning. It wasn't bad.
Now it's over. Well,
yeah.
Well, big things are happening at the flip over in Mapleton. This, last couple of weeks have been a little slow. All of a sudden, I'm super busy, and I think you might be between projects right now outside of your commercial building. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. I'm bidding on stuff left and right, and walking sites to get another opportunity right now. But yeah, we've pretty much wrapped up the commercial property as well. So
yeah,
a little cooler for me as far as the day-to-day routine and putting out fires.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the extra time over at Mapleton. We've got, I think yesterday we had our cabinet and trim guy, sheetrock guy, paint, concrete dude coming over to fix the steps, roofer, plumber to come fix a gas line. So, and then my man that's cleaning out trash. He was there yesterday hanging out too. He doesn't seem to have much going on, but anyway. But yeah, we were able to make a lot of progress yesterday, and hopefully this week is going to really kind of push us towards getting that thing listed. So I appreciate all the help there. So, well, why don't we go ahead and get started with a little bit of a market update. So I know we're looking at, you actually sent over your friends at Chicago Title, gives out a nice little synopsis of the market. Shout out to Chicago Title. Thank you for your future sponsorship. We definitely appreciate that. So I mean, it looks like kind of what we've been talking about. Their synopsis is really similar. It's a small market. It's not a slow market. Days on market and across DFW still under 30 days. It did say that the units sold, I think, were something like 24,000 over the last month. And, there's still a lot happening. And, on the more of a news of the state front, it looks like Dallas, compared to a lot of the other markets even in the state, is doing well. The mortgage rates are still close to 8%. That doesn't look like it's going anywhere anytime soon. And, if you have to buy a house, you got to buy a house. And if you got to sell, you got to sell. But there's not a whole lot of the voluntary shifting around. And that just hasn't really changed much, and it doesn't look like it's going to change a whole lot. And especially with what Chicago's saying, it doesn't look like they're anticipating much changing between now and the end of the year and going into the first quarter of next year. Is that pretty much what you're seeing too?
Yeah, absolutely. They said, we had a little bit of a dip, but I was listening to something else this morning, and, year over year, we're actually a little bit ahead price point wise than what we were even at the crazy frenzy that we were in a year and a half ago. So we've ticked up a little bit. We kind of went down, went flat, and then now we're back up a couple percentage points above where we were. So pretty crazy. I think inventory again is kind of the name of the game. Low inventory, we still got demand. Our average price point now is around $400,000 is the average price point, and that's also an entry level for a lot of people that are buying the first home. So pretty crazy market we're in.
Yeah, I don't know that we'll touch this on this in the news, but I do know that there's a new federal program that they rolled out, and I was trying to get some clarification on it, but I think what it comes down to, it's a new tool for mortgage brokers and people in the mortgage business, and it consolidates a lot of the federal programs that offer down payment assistance, especially for first-time home buyers. And I guess there's this new portal with that information that's supposed to really help those mortgage professionals find a perfect fit for people looking to get into a house. Because I think the federal government, I think they have a lot of programs out there, and maybe what they were seeing is, look, we understand times are hard. There's systems in place to help you out, but it doesn't seem that maybe people were tapping into it. And so they've made this new push to try to get that information to the mortgage brokers. And so I didn't quite see exactly how you would ask for that as a consumer, but I guess if you're looking for a house, just make sure that you're working with a mortgage broker that is very familiar with all the first-time home buyer credits and down payment assistance and all that sort of thing. And if you're in the mortgage business, I would imagine that was definitely brought to your attention, but if not, evidently the federal government has a new program that's supposed to be super helpful. So maybe that'll get some new people into the door. That would be great to bring them into the market. So especially about to, myself putting a house on the market here in the next month or so. And I think a lot of our buyers are going to be in the first time home buyer realm. I think that would be really nice to know about. So I'm not trying to find a broker.
I was listening to something as well about the loans out there, and they said FHA and other government loans have definitely upticked from where they were. But FHA, if you were an FHA qualified buyer, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, that was tough. It was tough because, with multiple offers, people were kind of shoving those to the side and going after the conventional and the cash deals. So now is more of an opportunity, and you're seeing a lot more people get qualified with FHA with competitive rates and, obviously the 3.5% minimum down, on all of that. So you're starting to see a lot more of that. And the FHA raised their lending values up last year, I believe. I forget what the number is, but they increased that loan amount to be more competitive. So we're starting to see a lot more FHA buyers. In fact, this last flip I just did in Irving, it was an FHA buyer.
Okay, nice. Well, let's go ahead and get into some of the headlines, a little bit of the news. It looks like there was a report that came out. The inflow of residents from California to Texas has slowed down a little bit. I think the headline was slightly misleading. Texas is still the number one destination for Californians, it looks like. And I believe the net inflow from California to Texas is still over 100,000 a year, if I'm reading all of this right. But it has slowed down a little bit, and one of the factors that they mentioned was the rise in real estate cost in Texas, and it's bridging the gap a little bit between California and Texas, and so it's not as much of a slam dunk to sell there and move somewhere like Dallas or Austin. And Arizona, Florida, they're absorbing some of those numbers. However, it looks like they're at, a third or a half of what Texas gets. And so,
but I will say this, using dollar per foot, somebody just kind of put this in my perspective the other day. When you talk dollar per foot, the average dollar per foot in California is $1,000 to $1,500 and goes up from there, a foot, right? So when we're talking here, and you're seeing stuff, and you still have a pretty good range of areas that are 200 a foot. It's creeping up to 300 a foot and things like that. And then of course you get into the higher, more designated areas of our city, Highland Park, and things like that, or even you getting out to lakefront, Cedar Creek Lake, like we talked about on one of our segments.
Yeah,
those are 600 plus a foot, right? And that seems it blows our mind, right, when we think about that here locally. But when you think about a California buyer that's used to paying $1,000, $1,500 a square foot, and they're seeing stuff that is $300, even $500 a foot, man, they're all over it, right?
Oh, yeah.
When you think about that, that's 50% discount than what they're used to paying, right?
Yeah, so, if you have a budget, I would imagine you do have a cap on your budget. But if the lifestyle, you're looking at selling a small little bitty, I lived in the Los Angeles areas for 3 years or 4 years for college. And, you're looking at a little bitty house in Santa Monica or inland a little bit, as opposed to the same price could get you a really nice house in Frisco with a backyard and a community pool and really great schools. So the quality of life, I would imagine, is still definitely something that they consider. However, I will say, the fact that the ocean is right there and Big Bear Mountain, and you look up Northern California, there's still a huge appeal to a lot of the natural resources they have there that we just are never going to touch. So.
And the weather and the lack of bugs.
That's right. Yeah, very few of their Airbnb owners are getting critiques on their mosquito problem. I would think that is a very real thing. So, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, the Fed is indicating, although they haven't made an official statement, we said last time that several of the big real estate groups have pushed the Fed to make an actual statement saying that they're going to pause the rate hikes. They haven't done that yet, but they have hinted in their cryptic economist way that they're going to pause, at least the next meeting will not have a rate hike. A lot of folks are starting to price that in. So hopefully they are at least slowing down. Evidently, a lot of experts thought they would go up another quarter this year. That remains to be seen. And I'm sure a lot of the global movement is also playing a factor into that. Who knows really how that's going to trickle down to our economy and the housing market. And, we're going into the holiday season, and, housing slows down anyway, but travel ticks up. There's always a lot of factors that change over the holiday season, and a lot of consumer spending creeps up. And, there's been a lot of reports on how this is actually when we start feeling a recession, when people start feeling more poor, they've already tapped out their credit, they've used up some of their savings over the last couple years. And so it'll be really interesting going into the first of next year to see how the Fed reacts. And to that point, though, one of the arguments that Chicago made in their synopsis was, from a sales agent standpoint, this is actually a great selling point for people wanting to buy a house. Go ahead and get in, buy a house, even if it's at 8%, because when the rates do tick down a little bit, I do feel like there is going to be an influx of houses onto the market and people looking to buy, because they're going to try to take advantage of this discount in their mind all of a sudden. And so they think that will raise the overall price of the house because there will be more demand. And as we've said, we're at a historical shortage of housing. So when you have more demand and less supply, prices will tend to go up. And so they're saying, go ahead and get into something now, maybe refinance later when rates tick down. Who knows? It's a little bit of a gamble, but that does make sense to me. But whether or not a lot of people will take advantage of that remains to be seen.
Well, and the value's going up, right? I mean, that's the other big thing, is just the increase in the sales prices and the values in your property. So it's interesting. That the thing that I did read in there was talking about, inflation was up over 9%, and so that's where all this chatter became, and they started, we've got to do something, right? We've all heard this before. But then, now they're saying, I forget exactly what the number was, saying that inflation was down, but their target is to try to get it somewhere down around 4%. So
I think their target rate, I think traditionally their target rate was around 4.25 or something like that. I've seen some suggestions that maybe their target rate's going to float closer to 5 for a while, just to have something realistic. But who knows? This is, for us in our generation, this is a little bit of new territory. This historically, in the 70s and 80s, 13% interest was a real thing, and this is nothing new for people that have been around that long. But for me, and I'm sure a little bit for you, this is uncharted territory. So we'll have to just see how it all plays out. I don't know that there's going to be a huge crash in home values like some predicted at some point. But again, with the global and with oil prices, and if there is an actual recession and people feel poor and there's a lot of layoffs, you just never know how that's going to trickle down. So
another thing I was reading too was talking about the default rate, right? Because I think there's a lot of investors, and that forever, right, being in this side of the game, everybody's always said, what do you buy foreclosures, and are you at the courthouse steps every month, right? And so everybody's kind of been waiting on that now, saying, hey, let's wait. There's going to be foreclosures. There's going to be all this, and technically, what they're saying now is the default rate has actually been one of the lowest it's been in a while. And you're also sitting, because of the increase in values, there's a lot of people that have equity in their properties. This is completely different than what we experienced back in 2008, 2009, 2010, when the foreclosure rates were, at an all-time high. Yeah. So it's a totally different world that we're living in. Again, just kind of trying to navigate as we go through. And, nobody has a crystal ball in real estate. I always say that.
No crystal ball, no guarantees. So, well, let's shift a little bit. And there was news that an East Texas ranch with a winery, vineyards, and 1,200 acres, I think a lake, and all that is on the market. And it's for $26.5 million. I'm not going to put a bid in. I don't know about you, but it did raise this question. I know Tavis a little bit. For those of y'all out there, I've known of Tavis for about 13 years, but we've been friends now for a year or so, and we've worked closely together on this project. And so I know a good bit about Tavis, but it actually made me think of this hypothetical, especially, the lottery was $1 billion a couple weeks ago, and you start dreaming, okay, what if I got that? So for you, is an East Texas ranch at $26 million? I guess if money wasn't really a huge option, but where would you go if you had to buy one house? Are you going mountains? Are you going lake somewhere? New York City condo for $30 million? Like what is your place that you would settle down and put a lot of money into? And if that was your one spot you had to make work, what would make you the happiest?
I'm more of a coastal person, so I think for me, we've talked about this. Tabitha and I've talked about it, and I've got some friends that have bought a place, and it's in the mountains, but it's not far. It's about a 7-mile drive to the beach in Costa Rica.
Oh wow!
And it's beautiful. I mean, it's just absolutely gorgeous. When I found out really what it cost him to put the thing together, I was blown away. I mean, when I first saw it, I was like, man, this thing is over $1 million. And mind you, it might be now, but I think when he built it, with land and everything, I think he was all in for maybe $350,000. The difference is you're not financing it; you're paying cash, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, something like that really seems attractive to me, right? It's kind of, you got the benefit of the rainforest. You've got a really attractive, overall civilization. The people are friendly. A lot of people speak English. It's still a good place to learn Spanish, but I think they're very universal. And again, I'm speaking all this from not being there. This is all from that's probably one of the places I haven't been in South America or the Caribbean. I haven't been to Costa Rica yet, but I've heard wonderful things about it, and that's always kind of stood out to me. On the other hand, I don't know. Tabitha and I have talked about it, and after owning some the midterm rentals versus like owning a place like that, because the caveat is always, hey, we'll own something in a tropical place like that, right? And then you just Airbnb it, so you're making cash flow that pays for it, etc. Sounds great in theory, and you could have a management company and all that, but it's still one of those things that's a headache. You're still potentially paying taxes on it every year, depending on where it is and where the country is. So I don't know. It's one of those things that we've also kind of talked ourselves into just having home base here at Plano, Texas, and then having the funds to travel at leisure as we want, right?
Yeah.
If you want to go and be in Europe for a couple months at a time, or and you just go and stay at some of the nicest places that you want to stay at, and you spend that capital for 2 or 3 months out of the year, and you use it that way versus spending all this money to buy a place and then maintain it and keep up with it. It's much more easier just to spend the money on vacations and travel where you want to go and not be tied to anything specifically. So anyways, that's something, again, we've talked about it.
Yeah. So, we've actually been to Costa Rica. We've been to Mexico a bunch, and the vacation spots, Cabo and Cancun. We actually have been to Costa Rica and Belize and Nicaragua and the Dominican for a day, I guess, on a cruise that counts. But St. Martin, a lot of that Caribbean life I think would be awesome. I don't, I guess I'm not ever doing that all day, every day. There's a part of me that, once I'm at a resort for 5 days, I'm ready to just have a peanut butter sandwich and, a Diet Coke somewhere. It's just,
no, I hear you.
I don't know how much and I know every day wouldn't be like that. There's a part of me that just really likes Dallas. And I grew up in Austin. I lived in Denver for a year, LA for college. And, we've traveled a good bit. I've also lived in small town Louisiana. I definitely know that's not part of it. And, I think if it were me, there's a huge part of me that would just, the food is good. But I can get close to cooking that now, so there's no need to deal with all that stuff to go get food. So, there's always been a part of me that would just like a decent sized property close to town and have, the nice house with the theater and all the amenities to kind of hang out at the house and have a good time. But I've always wanted to have enough land to have a little go-kart track out front so we can just ride go-karts and do that for hours and hours and shoot some skeet and, have a good time away from people, but still have access to town and all the great restaurants and go to see a Mavericks game and be able to fly anywhere in the world by drive in 20, 25 minutes. So, I'm biased, but I actually really, really like this area. And I think if I could get enough land close enough to go hunt, every once in a while, and I'm not a big hunter and gun guy, but it's just nice to have options. If I love having a garden, if I could have a few acres with some cool fruit trees and a really good garden and get to go hunt every once in a while and run a go-kart around with my kids and grandkids eventually for hours, I think that would be awesome. So, for me, that's probably where I would start. Now, that being said, if someone showed me a really cool resort, place down in Belize, I definitely, y'all are going to go on a cruise soon. Not a cruise, but y'all are going to island hop a little bit with some friends down in the Caribbean, and I want to do that. So, there's a lot of ways to spend your money. It's just hard to know exactly where you would settle down. But I see these properties for sale in Highland Park for $20 million, and you have all these ranches in Texas that are always coming up for crazy money. And I'm like, man, you know what? If I had the means, where would I want to go? And I don't think Highland Park is it for me. I don't think that's really some condo in New York, although I love it there. I think maybe this East Texas thing, if it was close enough to Dallas, as long as it's not, Longview, long as it's not, if it was close enough to Dallas, I think I would be in on that one. So, well, good deal. Why don't we get into our main event? And today we are going to talk a little bit about flips. And y'all know that Tavis's main area of knowledge are flips. He's done over 200. I'm on number 4. And we were discussing, there's been some times when we've walked through some houses that have been done, and Tavis will make a comment. There's one thing that specifically comes to mind, and I know he actually, I don't want to steal his thunder, but I'll bring it up in a little bit. There's something that he points out and says, I know if it's a decent flip if this is in place. And so it made me think like, okay, how do I avoid that? How do I avoid doing a cheap flip? How do I know when I'm walking through a house that's been done properly or may have cut corners? And for you, if you're out there and you're a real estate agent or you're looking to buy a house and you know something that's been renovated or flipped, you're walking through trying to figure out, okay, did they know what they were doing? Are there things lurking around the corner? What are the top things that you would want to seek out? So I'll start with you, Tavis. Why don't you hit us with a couple, and then I'll throw in a couple. What are some of the signs of a bad flip?
I've gone back and forth on this this morning, thinking about this a little bit, and it starts with kind of what you're originally looking at, right, and not missing things when you first walk it, and we always miss something. That's why it's important, even if you're in the traditional side of things, it's important to tell the buyers to go back and walk the property again, because they're going to see something they didn't see before. So if you're showing, 5 houses and they really like one, it's always a good idea to go back that day and say, hey, let's go back and look at it again, before we write an offer. Let's go back and see what we didn't see the first time. And I say that nowadays, we're, trying to think back, it's so crazy with technology, but 10, 11 years ago, we didn't have the cell phones that we have today. And I had a little flip phone, or not a flip phone, but like a little flip video something I used to use back in the day, or you had to bring your little digital camera along with you and then download the pictures to remember and do it. Now it's so easy on your phone, and you have the memory and everything else that goes with it to take photos and look back at it. So now I'm just very diligent on my walkthrough and taking pictures of as many things as I can. But electrical panels are big things, right? You just got to be aware of, roofs and things like that. Or those, I'd say roofs have probably gotten me on the last couple of deals because you're looking at it from the ground. And then by the time I get my roofer over there and walk it, he's like, oh, man, they said this roof is 4 years old, but this isn't 4 years old. This is 9 years old or 10 years old. And you're like, right. Oh, man, you got to be kidding me. Yeah. Plumbing. That's just one, and that's you almost have to know ahead of time if it has foundation or had foundation, depending on when it was built, and if it's cast iron, you're going to get stuck. You just plan on it, and it's really tough to make your numbers work because that's 20 grand, man. It's hard to make that up, and when you're competing like we are right now, I'm getting outbid by $20,000-$30,000, and that's it right there. Right, it's just the difference of knowing your rehab numbers. So I'll tell you.
So if you're a consumer and you're buying, like let's say they're buying one of your houses, how do they know that you've redone the plumbing? You say you've redone the plumbing, and I know that you do a good job. But if someone else is walking through, what are a few things that they can look? Is there anything that they can see from the top side that would tell them, yep, this plumbing has been done well? Or is that something that an inspector would find, or would they hire someone specific? How would they know that?
Typically, if plumbing has just recently been done, you're going to see trails of it in the dirt, right? Because the healing of those paths of new plumbing pipes are typically not going to be done easily. It's not going to be done quickly. Even if they put fresh sod, there's typically signs of movement, but usually it's the cleanouts, right, or the tell-all, the brand new PVC white cleanouts, and they're typically going to be in a couple spots, not just in the front of the home. They're going to be on the exterior of the home as well, depending on if the plumbing was rerouted or however. But the number one thing is ask for receipts. You just ask to show that the work's been done, or ask if the plumbing was completed. And as a flipper or an investor, you're going to want to show that too, right? Because that's one of those hidden items that you're going to want to prove that up to the buyer, to let the buyer know, hey, we already did this, and here's proof. But I'll go back to one of those things. One of my biggest mistakes ever was walking a house, and I walked the home. We went ahead and bought it. We closed on it. And I went back. I think the first time we took possession of it, I'm walking it, and I thought it was a 4-bedroom. And I'm walking this house, and I'm like, "Where's the other bedroom?" I'm like, this is a 3-bedroom. Actually, I think it was. I was calling a bedroom upstairs, which was a game room that was an addition, and then the master was down, and then the secondary, and I think it was missing. It was missing another bedroom down. And I thought that there was a bedroom there, and I walked it, and I was like, there's no bedroom. We're only 2 bedrooms down and 1 up. This isn't going to work. And fortunately, we had to basically redesign the formal living room to be a bedroom and put a closet in it to make the numbers work. So, functionality, floor plan is a huge thing. I mean, that's probably one of the big things is just, do you walk in and scratch your head? And if you scratch your head on, like, what were they thinking? How do these rooms lay out? I mean, if you do it as an investor, you guarantee yourself that the consumer buyer is definitely going to do it, and the agent representing the buyer is going to do it. And so you need to make sure that it makes sense, that everything flows and there's full functionality to the property.
Yeah. So pause just for a second, Tavis. So I think we're kind of talking about different things. I think we're talking about different things. So what I was, when I texted and what I was kind of leading into is, if you're a consumer and you're walking into a house that's been flipped, what are the things, and what?
Okay.
You know how you always say, hey, you go into the laundry room and see if they've changed out the box there.
Got it. Okay.
If they skip that, they skimped out on something. So I'm kind of coming more from like a consumer standpoint if you're buying a house, or you're an agent that's like, you have a customer that's wanting to buy a house, coming from the perspective of a flipper, how do you know, okay, this is a good sign, this is a bad flip here? Like caulking or cheap cabinets, or like, what are the different things you look at and be like, man, they did a crap job here? That's kind of what I was going for, kind of more from the consumer standpoint.
All right.
I knew you were kind of going down for them. Like, I knew you were going down like, oh yeah, if you're going to buy a flip, yes, I want to talk about that at some point. But so
okay, so do we need we're going to rewind?
Yeah, just rewind a little bit, and we don't have to talk a long time about it. But these are just kind of like the quick hit. Hey, what are some, like, if you're looking to buy a house that's been flipped? Yeah, I always fix this. If I see this, I know that they didn't know what they were doing, or I would be leery of that. Okay.
Okay.
So I'll lead it in again. So, all right, let's get to our next section, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to know if you're walking through a really bad flip. If you're looking to buy a house that has been renovated, and they say X, Y, and Z has been done, how do you know what's wrong? And coming from the perspective of someone who's flipped a ton of houses, and someone who's going through it now, I have some things that I know that I want to do every time. That if I see something, I feel like it's cheap. But I know Tavis has some things in his mind that he always does to every flip, and it doesn't necessarily have to cost a lot of money, but it sort of shows that he knows what he's talking about. So Tavis, hit us with a few things. If you're walking through a house looking to buy something that's been renovated, or you're representing a buyer, tell us a few things that you want to look for that are always kind of a pet peeve of yours. That you're like, look, you got to fix this. Otherwise, I would be leery. This might be a pretty cheap flip.
Yeah, so coming from a buyer's perspective, and this is something that Ashton, you and I have talked about, from an investor, it's always important to see how the other side sees it, right? And also keep in mind, we're not just selling it to the consumer buyer. We're selling it to the agent representing the buyer as well. And then we're having to sell it again to the appraiser. So you're actually selling the property 3 times, right? You're selling it to the buyer, you're selling it to the agent, and you're selling to the agent first in most cases, because they're the ones kind of setting up the showings and confirming to the buyer that, hey, this is a good property we need to go look at. And then the buyer is the one that walking through the door, seeing if they like it or they don't like it. And then the appraiser is representing the lender to make sure that everything makes sense in order to take the risk to lend the money on this property. So all that being said, coming into a home, usually you can kind of tell from the curb appeal, right? Did they do anything to the exterior of the home at all? Did they touch the exterior paint? Did they do the landscaping? And you don't have to do a crazy landscape package, but did they do anything to spend some time and effort to clean up the exterior? Yeah. And paint, caulking, things like that, just on the exterior. I don't necessarily care if they change the windows or not, depending on what they are. It's more about, just the overall presentation, and peeling paint, things like that, right? But going in through the door, things that we're looking for is, did they take the time to change out door hardware? That's something that doesn't cost a lot of money. That's an easy thing to do. And then light switch, outlets and cover plates. That's something that I used to kick and scream doing it, because it's just one of those extra things, depending on who's charging you money. Might cost you $500 to $1,000, but I mean, you just repainted the entire house. You got all new fresh paint, and then you got these ugly ivory nicotine stained plugs and cover plates everywhere, or you've got brand new cover plates and old plugs that are mismatched or painted over 20 times, right? Yep. So those are some of the simple things that just, hey, did they take the extra effort to pay attention to that detail? And then going into the laundry room and seeing if they've changed out the washer box or not. Yep. Again, that's an easy thing for a plumber to do. And they're always a pain in the butt, man. Those old washer boxes, they always leak. And they usually...
That's the one you've pointed out to me. I wouldn't have thought of that. And honestly, that's probably one I would cheap out on, because it's hidden by the washer. It's like, okay, what is the deal? But I know that's a pet peeve of yours. You walk in and you're like, hey, did they do this, or did you do this? Have you accounted for this? And that's just an aesthetic thing, and it's a functional thing. You might as well just go ahead and just get some new fixtures in there, make sure it's not leaking. This is something that's hidden. So I think that's a great example right there. From a construction standpoint, it's going to be hidden. Not many people are even going to go to look for that, but it's just better to go ahead and fix that. And so if you see someone that's done that and thought through the process enough to go ahead and fix that, they probably, in a lot of ways, know what they're doing, and they're doing a thorough job of just making this. They're upgrading the bones of the house, even if it's not this crazy aesthetic thing that's going to be super flashy. So
right. And then the electrical panel, right? And if it's not been changed, was it at least labeled, right? Was it at least, did the electrician take time to label the electrical panel and stuff like that? Those are just little things that you kind of know. Those are pet peeves of mine that I want to make sure are done. And not just that the consumer's going to see it, the inspector's going to see it. So actually, I think you're selling it 4 times, because you've got to sell the inspector on it too, right?
Yeah.
And then another thing is smoke detectors. It's so easy to put battery-operated smoke detectors in the bedrooms. By code, they need to be in each sleeping quarters or each bedroom, and then the adjacent hallways directly outside of the bedroom. So even if they're not hardwired, just putting battery-operated ones in there, again, it's just a little thing. It's going to be one less thing for the inspector to tag on the inspection. So not a real big deal. And then, I don't know. What's the other thing? I would say probably... Go ahead.
Well, I was going to mention, so for me, I guess mine's a little bit more cosmetic. And I think the inspector is going to pick up on some of those things that are code, outlets, GFCI. Some of those things are going to be brought to your attention. So you might as well do those. And if you go into a place that they haven't done those, you're going to at least have a chance to fix it. For me, if I go into a flip, I actually did an open house for an investor one time, and for whatever reason, they had done soft close drawers in the kitchen, and I thought, man, this is great. This is actually a relatively cheap flip. It was in East Plano. I think the sales price was $350, but they had done these soft close hinges, and to me it just showed some attention to a little bit of a higher end thing, but probably didn't cost just a ton of money to do, but it made the house feel nice. It wasn't these old rickety drawers that you're having to force around. So I really like that. When I see, there's two things: super cheap faucets and super cheap shower fixtures and trim kits. I think they read very cheap. If they're not attached to the wall really well, or if they're even a little bit loose, that drives me nuts. And then caulking. And if, and I ran into this at Polk with my guys. I mean, if they're doing trim work and they cut it wrong, and instead of recutting it properly, they just caulk, an inch and a half's worth of distance to try to figure it out. Like, it's really hard to make that look crisp and clean. Maybe one time here, okay, we'll just but if it's over and over and your corners are just not crisp, it's just, they either didn't have good people doing their stuff, or they didn't care enough to go and punch and change it. Something is off. And I actually walked a flip recently that they had a lot of grout and caulking issues in the bathrooms. And especially like the main bathroom, which is supposed to be the nicest one, and there's a lot of glass enclosure and you can see everything. And it's like, as a homeowner coming in, like, I don't know what am I supposed to do with that? If there's a real messy grout, or there's really messy caulk lines, it's like, that's not going to ever get better unless you redo it. And so if someone can't punch that in the moment and care enough to walk through and try to fix some of those things, I just think, I don't know, like, those are the things that drive me crazy. From, hey, I'm about to put this out to the world and take pictures and have people walk through. I want it to look as nice as possible. And it's not going to come up on inspection. Messy grout doesn't come up on an inspection. So those are all things that they're going to have to be paying attention to. So those are a couple of things that I would look out for. So, all right. So our main topic today, we are going to dive in just a little bit. Tavis, do you want to do a deal deep dive? You've done so many deals, and I thought it'd be a good idea. Why don't we tackle one of them? You tell us some of the basics of it. Tell us how you got that property, what you did to it, and let's just kind of walk through for people to see how you're thinking about things and structuring deals and how it turned out for you. So, what deal are you talking about today?
Yeah, Ashton, I've got one actually that I wanted to talk about. I picked this property up earlier this year, 2023. This was end of February when I picked this property up.
Okay.
This is what I would consider a tier 1. This was in Garland. This was actually a lead from an agent. And I think I got the lead like in December of last year.
Okay.
We didn't close it till February. I can't remember what the delay was. I think it was more the seller had kind of timing that she was trying to work out as far as when she was going to move out of the property and close. And then we ended up doing a month lease back on top of this property as well. So the project time ended up taking a little longer. But this was a true convenience situation, meaning that the seller, the house wasn't in bad shape, although the seller had a plumbing leak, but this was on the freshwater side, and I believe probably a hot water side or something like that. So it was a slab leak on the freshwater side. She had that repaired already, and they had rerouted all the lines through the attic and down the walls. But when I came into the property, all the floors were ripped out, carpet was out of the bedrooms, sheetrock holes were exposed in the walls everywhere, and this poor lady, all of her family lived out in Fort Worth, and I think she just didn't really want to mess with it. She bought the property in 2014, so she didn't buy it that long ago, but it already yielded quite a huge spread in equity. And so for her, it was just true convenience. We were able to pay the agent on the deal a full 3%.
Nice. And
get into this deal. I think that my projection originally when I bought the property was like a 335 to 350 ARV, and I was able to pick the property up for right at looks like $232,000.
Okay.
And this was including the agent fee in the deal. So we picked it up on the 21st of February. We ended up selling the property on the 21st of June. So right at 120 days project time from acquisition. Again, I lost 30 days because she had a lease back on it. So we couldn't start renovation for about 30 days. But this one, the project ran a little bit, meaning the cost. I think that my original evaluation of renovations was somewhere in the $56,000 to $60,000 range originally. And I think one of the big things was, it might have been the roof that caught me by surprise. I think the roof ended up needing to be replaced. And then we went ahead and did gutters because there was I'll tell you one of the big things on this one that caught me by surprise. I knew there was a little bit of wood rot in the back. There was an old pergola in the back that was in really bad shape, so I knew that had to go away. Ended up replacing about 75% of the soffit, or not the soffit, but the fascia on this property. Okay. And the crazy thing is the builder used 2x6 fascia versus like a 1x6 fascia on this house. So that was odd, and it was expensive. And so right out of the bat, we were spending extra money on the exterior of the home. One of the things we were just talking about that, people may or may not even notice, right? Once it's painted, they're not going to ever know the difference. But for me, I knew it needed to be done. So there was an uptick in cost for sure. I think that probably $15,000 to $20,000 over budget that I ended up spending on this property.
Now, if I remember right, this is the one were you debating on whether to keep the countertops from the beginning, or did you originally plan to replace them and then you decided to keep them after all the costs ran up?
My goal was to keep them from the beginning because I knew it was just an extra cost. And again, from what I was paying for the property and getting into it, there wasn't a lot of spread in this deal. Originally, I mean, it was a good amount, but it wasn't a lot to just keep spending money on cosmetics because I knew that I had the sheetrock repairs, the roof repairs, and then getting into it off the get-go with the extra exterior wood rot and things like that I needed to correct. The other big surprise on this property was the termite damage, and the seller had no knowledge of it, and there was termites all over this place. So we had active termites in the master shower area. We had termites in the garage area where they had a bunch of firewood that was stored in the garage. Okay. And you've probably seen this on inspection reports before that this is a no-no, but it caused a lot of termite damage inside the walls there. So like 4 different sides of this house had some type of active termite that we had to treat and get through and then replace some wood and really dive into it deep. So master bath renovation ended up being more than what I was anticipating originally, meaning that we replaced the tub. I think originally I was thinking I was going to keep the tub and spray it, but then when we found the termites, we had to go ahead and do it right and do a freestanding tub in there. And then the hall bathroom, we were going to keep the cabinets. We ended up putting a new cabinet in there. So again, we had that increase in budget, right, that we didn't plan on. Ultimately, the good thing is the market was pretty strong, and we listed the property at $385,000, which again, if you remember, I said I was originally anticipating somewhere between $335,000 and $350,000. So I was able to actually get some recent comps at the time in that 4-month time span that allowed me to increase that price up to $385,000, and we sold it with multiple offers in 3 days.
Yeah.
So the great news was, we ended up selling this property. We made close to $60,000 net. It was about $57,795 to be exact, and about an 18.72% cash on cash return. So, mind you, I leveraged it with a bank, so that the ROI is actually way better than that. But I always like to just show it as a cash on cash. Yeah. And then the closing cost on that. So that, this is the cool thing. We track this as well. And just because I'm in my spreadsheet, I'm telling you guys these numbers. Yeah. But I always use that 95% number, at the back end cost to calculate 5% of closing costs. Yeah. And my closing costs on this deal were 4.81. So that's why, That's why
that is more than an educated guess. That is just an educated statement. That's
just
what
tracking
costs.
it, right?
Yeah.
So that's a live deal there. Did really well.
Great.
Love to get more of it. The funny thing is, it was not much after that. I saw a wholesale deal come across my email, and of course they were using my comp, and but they wanted. I wanted to say they wanted like, I don't know, close to $300,000 is what they were advertising this property for, right?
Yeah, start over.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm writing them an offer down under 250, and of course they didn't want to hear anything about it, but I knew I just put $75,000 into this house, right? So they were coming at it thinking, oh, you can get away with $40,000-$40,000. I'm like, yeah, no, it's not going to work that way.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate you getting into that, and I know it's really interesting for people to hear exactly. You see it on TV, and but your timelines are really tight. You guys are really responsive. I'm hoping to get into doing more and more of that, style of flip. And right now, I have been stuck in these long cycles. But we're making some movement. We're learning, and the thing that I'm learning even in the last week or two is just how detailed you are on all your record keeping and how much exactly all your line items, which should go without saying, but it's really easy to, like I've said before, it's really easy to let some of these things slide, and you budget $6,000. Well, this is $6,200. Okay, yeah, let's go ahead. Let's do that. Here's your deposit. Do that 2 or 3 times in a row, and all of a sudden you're $3,000 or $4,000 over what you had budgeted because you're just trying to get it done. Whereas if you can come from in the beginning and you're really tight with your guys, what they're going to charge you. You can budget better. More what's going to cost, and you're not guessing as much as I am at this point. So it comes with time and it comes with experience. I know that. So I appreciate you giving everybody that insight. So if for some reason there's an agent out there or someone's sitting on a house that they cannot sell, or they know will not appraise or will not be good on the MLS, it's got no carpet and it's got holes in the sheetrock just like your Echo house did, that agent knew this is not going to go well. So they know to reach out to you. If someone's out there and they want to work with you on that, again, you pay full commission on things. They are going to get paid. They can be partners with you on that as an agent. So how are they going to get in touch with you?
Yeah, Tavis, like Travis with no R. Reach out to me on Facebook. Reach out to me on Instagram as well. And you can send me a DM, and we can be there within 24, 48 hours typically to come walk the job and see if it's a fit for us.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I am Ashton Hines, the Dallas real estate guy on Instagram and Twitter and the Facebooks and all that sort of thing. And please reach out to me if you have any questions on buying, selling, looking for investments. If you want to come walk my property there at Mapleton I've been talking about so much, I'd love for you to check that out and just kind of show you what we've got going on there. And please reach out. Definitely like, subscribe the podcast. Send it to a friend. We're actually searching for people who would be interested in being on the podcast. So if you have something to say, if you're in the Dallas area and you work in the industry, if you do anything with mortgage or title or anything, and you just want to pop on and give us your 2 cents on how the market's looking for you, we'd love to have you. So reach out for that, and we will check back with you next Tuesday for the next installment of Real Estate Heavyweights University. We'll talk to you then.